Being an Indonesian woman in 2021 really means being a vehicle for change. Gender inequality is a systemic problem. I think everyone needs to play a part to build a more inclusive world for women. Governments need to create policies that support women's ability to play a role in society. Companies, if they haven't already, need to be proactive in ensuring that women have fair career progression opportunities and improve the male to female ratio in leadership roles. And I believe that no matter who you are, there will be something that you can do to help contribute to recovery.
There we are. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Women's Forum next session, Humanizing the Cities of the Future, the Champions of Inclusive Green Infrastructures. I'm your host, Star Jones. Please welcome our guests. It is my pleasure to have with me today some extremely brilliant minds when it comes to lots of topics, but especially this one. Let me first introduce very briefly. You can see their impressive credentials in your information and the introductory information, but I do want you to know that we have Kim Tae-yong, the Secretary General of ITF. He is Secretary General of the International Transport Forum. He was elected by the transport ministers of the ITF member countries at their annual summit in June 2017. Young, it is a pleasure to have you here, Secretary General. To my far left is Jean-Pierre Clémédieu. How did I do?
Very good. No, Clémédieu. That's good.
I did okay, all right.
Close.
The chairman of the board of directors of ENGIE. Chairman Clémédieu was appointed chairman of the board in May 2018, and he has been CEO and a board member of multiple corporations. He is our corporate expert sitting here today. Jean-Pierre, it's a pleasure. To my immediate left is Marie-Christine Lombard, who, like me, will be the woman on the panel today, the CEO of Geodis.
Correct.
A graduate of the Essex Business School, Marie-Christine Lombard has held positions in the transport and logistics area for more than 22 years. After 11 years in the banking sector, she joined Jet Services in 1993 as Chief Financial Officer and has been making strides and changing lives ever since. Welcome, Christine, Marie-Christine. And to my immediate right, he needs very little introduction. This is our friend, the mayor of Milan, Giuseppe Sala, who is also known as Beppe, I understand. That's what everybody calls you. Our official ambassador here in Milan, and when I tell you he is a true ambassador backstage, I said to him, I wanted true Milan food tomorrow night for dinner, and instead of asking an assistant to help me, he himself got on the phone and made a reservation, okay? That is a reason to be here in Milan enough. That is, and it also brings me to exactly where I'd like to start on this topic. I think everyone in this room knows that the economic, social, and health crisis really has been changing the ways of conceiving and living in urban areas. Cities and local communities must really reinvent their traditional services, facilities, policies, programs, systems, and networks to become more human-centered. We have to now focus on the individual. And so I'm going to ask our mayor, our host, to actually be our fire starter today. Mr. Mayor, today's cities function as a melting pot for people of and with differing genders and cultures and backgrounds and religions and interests and social statuses, if we're honest. And as a result, cities are not only growing in population, but they're becoming really increasingly diverse, especially as it relates to an influx of refugees and immigrants. And I know that the European Union and the United States is really seeing this happen. So, sir, I'm going to ask you to set the table for our discussion today by sharing with us your observations and thoughts on the best practices and really the most effective measures for fostering the concept of social cohesion while tackling this new normal that we're all facing right now. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you for everything, and thank you to be here. Thank you, Mrs. Corazza, for having chosen Milano, which is a good opportunity for us. So thank you all. You know, I'm quite old, and 30 years ago, more or less, we have been told the people want to leave the cities. They want to live in the countryside because cities are too risky. Too much populated, too traffic, too everything. But the reality and the contemporaneity told us, which is exactly the opposite,
Exactly.
because the people want to live in the city. The real problem is that we want to have a different city. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned immigration and melting pot, melting. It may be an opportunity. You know, in Italy we have some 9% of non-Italian of origin. Yeah. I cannot call them immigrants. In Milan, 20%.
Wow.
But Milan works. Mm-hmm. So this is the first thing. So, and it is clear that cities are always more central. And I don't want to seem presumptuous, and I don't want to seem arrogant, but if something new we will see in the city, and we will see, mm-hmm. and probably we will see it in Milan. So we are working to create a different social life. Mm-hmm. It would be simply a mistake to try to run back as soon as possible to the past, because we cannot throw away some of our potential and fundamental characteristics, like to be a touristic city, mm-hmm. a city where creativity, fashion and design, and university. You know, we have 200,000 university students. Wow. Out of 1.4 million inhabitants. It's a ratio similar to Boston, to give an example. Mm-hmm. So those are opportunities. But on the meantime, our life is presenting us a sort of count, is telling us you have to change. And there are some secular trends that are facing our life, and environment, for instance, is and even the digital transformation. So we know, and for this reason we need the effort of everyone in the city. But the cities can be the perfect ground to change the situation. And let me tell you a thing from a political point of view. You find, mainly in the Latin countries, you can find many women mayors.
Yes.
In Paris, in Barcelona, in Bogota, mm-hmm. in Montreal, for instance.
In Chicago.
In Chicago. But when you, mainly in the Latin country, you don't find women which are in condition to become premier or president of the republic. And this is, it is simply a mistake, because we are seeing, we are understanding that we are losing an opportunity. Mm-hmm. It's not a question of to be, 50 and 50. Yes, my council board is composed by 6 women and 6 men. And
Bravo.
And my vice mayor is a woman, and the youngest councillor is Gaia, 25 years old. Wow. In a city like Milan, but it works. It works. So that is for sure an opportunity. Now, it is fundamental to be reunited in session like this one, to testify, to use any single opportunity to tell the people, hey, open the eyes, but also to make actions, and we are making action. Mm-hmm. In our idea of the 15-minute city, which is, something which is common to Paris, Barcelona, or Milan, we see the city as a whole, but we want to work on the single part of the city. And working on the I mean, the timing for the family and for the work and for your job, if I give you the services so close to your house,
Yes.
and the services are schools, medicine, green, sport, this is fundamental for everyone, but it is fundamental for women. And again, we have a company managing urban transport. It is called ATM, yes, and it is fundamental because at the end of the day, the people in a city sees, I mean, a political attitude, but first of all, they want to have the basic services like waste, public transport, and so on. And for instance, there, we launch a recruitment campaign targeting women, because now it's the time. Because we believe that the people, if you enter, if you take a bus and you see a woman driving a bus, for me it is better. So why not? And even managerial, in the managerial structure, everywhere. But it is now it is fundamental to make action and to tell the people, if the public system, that in the common understanding, is something slow, old, not flexible. If the public sector can do it, you can do it.
Yes.
So my religion is, first I do a thing, I do something, and then I ask you to do the same. That is the reason for which now all the lights will be pointed on the cities, and we must feel the duty to change.
So you want to lead by example and hope that the private sector will follow the government's example.
Absolutely. That is the right thing, and mainly in Italy, because I mean, we live in a fantastic country where after the Second World War, in 76 years, we had 70 governments.
70.
But in the city, you have a mayor for 5 years, or in my case, for 10 years.
Bravo.
And that is not the point. But I mean, in 10 years, you can change, you can dramatically change the situation. That is the reason for which, of course, I'm a little bit biased, but I believe that the revolution will start in the cities. So I feel my duty.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Mayor. And it does table set for us, and it lets me come over to Marie-Christine, because as the mayor so eloquently put it, having women incorporated in every aspect of urban planning is absolutely imperative for us to move forward. But we have to tell the truth. Despite the leaps and bounds made over the past century, there's still a long way to go when it comes to global gender equality. And inequality actually impacts the way women and girls travel, work, play, as the mayor was pointing out, everything from public transportation to what schools you can access, et cetera, et cetera. You are clearly the only woman on this panel, and furthermore, you're the CEO of one of the major logistics companies in a sector that is known to be led by more men than women. So the first question is, why did you choose logistics? And what have been the keys to your success? I know there are a number of women there and men who are smart that want to know information. And how do you think we can further women's leadership in this area? Marie-Christine, you take the floor.
Well, first of all, I'm happy to be here. It's always good to witness on where you are, what you've done, and the future you see for women. First of all, I think logistics is not worse than any other sector. Let's be clear. In fact, I was spending time this morning with my team in Italy. We are actually doing quite well in Italy in terms of women leadership. In logistics, we have 40% or to 50% of the labor force that is women. So at the very beginning, we are equal in number. Where it starts to really derail is when you come to executive positions. In Geodis, we're making a lot of efforts. we are 20% of women executives. And we have a strict objective which comes to 30% by 2023. So the issue is, why is that gap exist? Why, once you have the same number at the very beginning? Well, there's frankly a number of reasons, I think, and the sectors are different. So I will speak about logistics, of course. When you are in logistics, your expertise, the most valued expertise, is coming from the operations. That means you have to have run hubs. A hub is where all the parcels, all the shipments, all the activity happens at night, because things are being actually transmitted, transiting at night. So yes, indeed, you have less women willing to work at night, which frankly I understand, because I didn't come to logistics from the operations. If I had had to do that, probably I would not be in logistics. Let's be clear. So, and then, so you move the ladder, you move up by showing constantly, because for women it's always that thing you have to do, which is to show that you are capable, that you are indeed legitimate to go above. So operations being what it is in logistics, that is one obstacle.
Okay.
However, there's plenty of other jobs, and by the way, there are also operations jobs that are not at night. You can be an engineer, building solutions for supply chain of clients. That requires actually quite, well, an engineering background, of course, but also can lead you to become an executive in logistics. IT, technology, digital, commercial. Well, anyway, there's all kinds of jobs that can be actually done by women. And even at night, by the way, if the women want, there's no problem. There should not be any problem. So just to summarize, logistics is not worse, actually, on the contrary. And I am just a witness of that. I am the CEO of a major logistics company. So what did I do? I didn't do anything spectacular, frankly. First of all, I think it started early on. I had a role model, my mother, who was an executive back in the 50s in France. And back in the 50s in France, I can tell you the country was not very amicable to women executives. But she was strong. She was divorced. She had to make a living. And I saw her, fighting for us, actually, the 2 children she had. And frankly, for me, it was all about, work hard, be financially independent, and hence, you will make it through life. That was my mother's example. Then, as you said, I went to a business school called ESSEC in France, so it's a good business school. But then I moved to the United States, actually, in your country, back in the 80s. And I started in Wall Street, actually. And I have to say, my first job was in the US, and the Americans have trained me. Because without bad-mouthing my school, I didn't learn as much as I should have in that school. So when I moved to the banking industry, they really trained me. And I started to really work there for 8 years, 9 years, and came back to France as an investment banker for Paribas. But then I wanted to go into concrete. Banking was too far away for me. And that's where I joined as a financial director this medium-sized company called Jet Services, but was the express leader in France. So that's the story of my life. Yes. And once you have that, and you also have to have partners, I was going to say in crime, they're not crime, but partners that trust you. And that was the founder of that company that really trusted me and actually transmitted his knowledge to me.
We call them sponsors in our
sponsors, indeed.
Exactly.
Sponsors.
Not just mentors, but sponsors.
Sponsors. And he was a man. And in fact, when I look at my career, for whatever it's worth, I had more men sponsors than women sponsors. That's why it's so important to be in this Women Forum, because at the end of the day, women have to also transmit what they know and help other women. So that's why I'm delighted to be here and try to help. Now, recipes for one person to another is different, obviously. I can only say, well, in my case, I went to the US. Yes, that was an eye-opener. I was exposed to international life. I learned English, which frankly was a key to a lot of things for me. Because when you master the English language, which is the world's language, well, you can pretty much negotiate whatever you want. So, and last thing, because I don't want to bother anybody here, spending too much time speaking about myself, it's all about going outside your comfort zone. I took risks. I was in Paribas, which was, maybe you don't know, it was a major investment bank in France at the time. And I moved as financial director of a small and medium-sized company. And I remember the bosses of Paribas wanted to interview me and say, what's wrong with you? You're going as a finance director to that small company. And I said, yes, because I want to be in a concrete world, and I think I will have more opportunities, actually, to be an executive. And here I am. So every time in my life, I took risks.
Yes.
Probably undue risks in some cases, private and professional. But at the end, I think this is the only way you can move on. And by the way, this does not, it's not only true for women, I think it's also true for men.
Thank you so very much, because I hear on the right, that's really wonderful advice. I hear on the right side here from the mayor, really you have to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. And from you, you must take a risk and take a chance and step outside of your comfort zone. And this is all very good information as we start to look for solutions. And so it gives me the opportunity to turn to the Secretary General. Young, the International Transport Forum, as I told everyone, is an intergovernmental organization with 63 member countries. So we now get an opportunity to see what the world is thinking. It's also the only global body that covers all transport modes, which provides a platform for discussion and, as I said, pre-negotiation of policy issues across all transport modes. So since we're talking about urban planning and the integration of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how have you worked with the member countries for best practices to sort of integrate gender equality in transport policy? Because that's what's going to move the needle.
Thank you very much, and I feel really honored to be invited by Women's Forum once again, because since 2017 and 18 we collaborate very strongly with Women's Forum, focusing on the gender issue. But many people ask the question, what is the relationship between transport and gender? Because when you hear the term transport, you usually think about the man and power and hardware and some steel and construction and so on. And, but if we know that in our society, half of the population is women, and including my mother and sisters and our daughters, and the users are also, half of them are women. But if you look at the city, we can think about two elements different. So one is a static element. You have a housing and hospital and universities like this, and also you have transport system. So transport system is like a circulation in our body that delivers oxygen to every static element in the society. So if you really want to make people work and enjoy culture and do some other things, basically we can really know the importance of the transport in the society. But if we think about the women, for example, irrational discrimination still exists in the transport sector because we don't have many women employees in the transport and mobility sector, traditionally speaking, and many higher level decision makers are male. So basically, recently we began to talk about this gender issue in the ITF with 63 member countries, but not every country is on the same level. So mostly from Western Europe, still they take the lead in discussing this important issue. But some countries from Asia or some Middle East, for example, are still left behind a bit on this question. So for us, what is important is to provide them with evidence in what aspect still women are discriminated in the transport sector in terms of employment and security and social security and safety and so on. So basically we try to provide some concrete evidence, and we do not try to be ideological and normative. We try to analyze data that we have. So recently we finalized the analysis of the travel patterns of women in mobility sector, and also we are now working on the gender analysis toolkit for transport policymakers to have more sensitivity on this issue. And we are also working on the relationship between decarbonization and gender issues and so on. So basically, this question is quite complicated, and it differs from one country to another, but at least we try to find best practices to share, and we try to let people know that this is a way to go in the end, but with concrete evidence and data analysis. So that's what we are doing.
It makes good sense. As we say, we're going to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. We're going to take risks and step outside of our comfort zone, but we're also going to collaborate and find best practices, as you have outlined. It's important for us to have discussions, and diversity at the table brings for those collaborative discussions. Thank you so very much, Young, for that contribution. We appreciate that. And then finally, as our opening session, let me go to Chairman Jean-Pierre Clemadou. Jean-Pierre, let's talk some more practical solutions. We had started this in the back a little bit. You've served as in various corporate leadership roles throughout your career, and now as the chairman of the board of ENGIE. What are your best practices for, and I'm going to throw some things out, listening, training, and empowering women while globally promoting diversity for better cities? Because all of those aspects are very important. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you very much, Sarah. You're asking a very complex question which has two angles, corporation and cities. So let me make a bit of an explanation of why I think ENGIE tends to bridge these two elements, and then I will focus on corporation and then cities. So ENGIE is a large multinational utility, but we've made a decision some years ago to focus on energy transition. We want to support our key customers, corporations, cities, local government, to make sure that they can enter into this very important transformation using the best technologies that we can bring to them. And this is really today, this is part of a purpose. In fact, we have decided at ENGIE to put this in our bylaws to make sure that we consider it as being really the mission of ENGIE, supporting energy transition. Then, why is gender diversity important? And yes, indeed, as a chairman of the board of ENGIE, I think that the board needs to make diversity a priority, and the board needs to follow up on what's going on within the company. We need clear business reasons to make something a cause. So and it's not just to be politically correct or anything like that. So two very simple reasons. Talent pool. If we want to be effective today in the world of energy transition, we need the best people with us. And we can't just focus on half of the potential, half of the talent pool. And for us, this is really key. Second important element, diversity. Out of, well, maybe 30 years of career in industry, I am absolutely convinced that diverse team, and diversity is not just gender, diversity has a lot of other components, diverse teams perform better. Teams which reflect and mimic our customers, and our customers are very diverse. Teams where we can bring different culture, different experiences. So these two elements are the reason why we have decided at ENGIE to make diversity a priority. Then what do we do? Very simple to express, very complex to put in practice. Hire, be careful, be attentive to diversity in the hiring process. Make sure that we develop our female talent, make sure that we retain them. And this is really the simple tools that we are using to make sure that ENGIE is a diverse company. ENGIE, for those of you who don't know the company, has a bit of a specificity that I'm at the same time very proud of and a bit ashamed. And this specificity is the fact that we are among the CAC 40 which is the leading French index of the largest companies, we are the only company with a female CEO. We have decided to select Catherine McGregor as a CEO. By the way, Catherine will be attending to your next meeting in Paris mid-November. We have decided to select Catherine as our CEO, and I'm very proud because I think it shows that indeed we care about diversity, not that we have chosen Catherine because she is a woman, but when I was running this process of preparing for the selection of a CEO, I decided that at every step we'll keep a diverse group of people. And when we came to the final decision in front of the board, we had a male and a woman candidate, and the board decided that Catherine was the best. So reasons to be proud, but reason to be ashamed, because I think that today, in 2021, being in a situation where there's only one woman leading a CAC 40 company, I think, as a member of a French business community, I've been involved in various boards. I'm still on the board of a couple of other companies. I think it's a failure for the French business community not to have been able to generate more women CEOs. My feeling is that there are a few in the making as we speak. So I expect that this sample will develop in the next few years. But that's really a point of attention. Going back to cities for a few comments. As I've mentioned, we are very attentive and we are partners of cities when it comes to energy transition. And we've come to realize that women are especially attentive to energy transition. Mm-hmm. And there were a number of studies which were done which demonstrate that women are much more attentive to climate change and the risk associated to climate change than men. And it means that indeed, when we partner with cities, we see that these diverse teams we are interacting with are indeed more effective than if there was less diversity. Mm-hmm. And when we work with cities, we believe very much, or communities of all sorts, we believe very much in collective intelligence. And collective intelligence is really putting together people who are coming with different angles, different views, different histories. And once again, we are more effective when we bring this diversity around the table to look at a specific problem. So I am indeed convinced that indeed diversity will help communities, cities, metropolitan areas tackling much more effectively the big challenge that we have all to tackle, which is the energy and climate transition.
You have actually made this a priority. It is so very clear and articulated something that I've talked about many, many times. Diversity and inclusion, you've made a business imperative, not just because it feels good and it makes everybody makes them think that it's a good thing to do, but because it makes sense. And since we're talking about a public company, something that has to make money, my father used to say, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense. And so we're trying to make sense, and putting everyone in the pipeline makes sense.
And if I can make a comment, this year, when we are preparing the shareholder meeting, we engage with our shareholders. Mm-hmm. There were two priorities this year. The first one was climate change, not a surprise, but the second one was gender diversity. I talked to fund managers in London, in New York, in Paris, or wherever, and they were asking this question: what are you doing regarding gender diversity? How are you measuring your progress? Mm-hmm. What can you do to do better? So for me, it was very reassuring, and it should be for all of us to see that indeed the investment community is starting to consider that this is an important element, and in some cases, a pretty fundamental element.
Walking the walk, taking the risks, collaborating with others at the table for best solutions, and understanding that it is a business imperative. That is best practices here on this chair. I'm just very proud to have heard this, a great summary. And so, Mr. Mayor, I'm coming back to you because we've talked about the sort of policy changes that we all can do, but I know that there's some impediments. And so as I was making some notes, I thought to myself, what are the challenges when building socially inclusive cities? So we've talked about what we'd like to do, what we need to do. What are your impediments to accomplishing the things that we've outlined?
Listening to Jean-Pierre, I was thinking to my electoral campaign, because I went to the neighborhood, to the peripheries, And let me say, not only me, but me and also all the candidates everywhere in Italy. And I told them, I know it is not easy, but thanks to the Next Generation EU, thanks to the European funds, we will be in condition to modify the city and your life, because we will invest in infrastructure, we will prolong the metro lines, we will refurbish your houses, we will work on the energy and the heating system, and that is right. And let me see, it is absolutely right, because 30% of all the European funds will come to Italy.
Yes.
So we are rich in culture, we are rich in history, in creativity, but we have a huge debt, and now we have the opportunity to reinvest. But now I open a question for you, for us, because having in mind which kind of investment we will run, if we talk about prolonging metro lines, buying electrical buses, refurbish schools and public houses, they will generate new jobs for men or for women? Because this is a risk, I'm telling you, Chiara, because we have to pay attention. So we must ask to our government, okay, everything is clear, and we have to run, because to utilize these funds, we have to be very fast. We have to commit all the money for the end of 2023, and all these resources has to be addressed to some specific sector. And in the meantime, our government will make reforms. So it is not easy. So my duty is that we will lose the opportunity to make a new step ahead in the gender equality. Because they are not, I mean, activity which is naturally, they are not creativity sometimes. They are not services or tourism or sometimes, I know your point, because your sector, I mean, it is not, in origin it was a business, a new job for men, and now we are trying to modify the situation. I know. But that is the point. So my suggestion is that we think about that, and in the dialogue with the government, we will ask to be sure that this new investment will not reinforce the disequality, the gender disequality. So that is fundamental for cities and countries.
And playing off on that, Marie-Christine, thinking about what the mayor has said, and you and I just started to discuss this before, in order to put people in the pipeline, they need to be trained and be ready for these jobs. And you so eloquently pointed out that operations is sort of the launching pad. So what do we need to do to train more women and girls to be in that pipeline that's going to lead to the elevated status?
Sure. I'll speak about logistics, but I think it can go, it can also work for construction work, for any industrial sector. First of all, you need to make these sectors appealing. You need to explain what these sectors are doing for the overall life of people. Example, logistics. Without logistics, you don't get your food, you don't get your clothing, you don't get the masks that saved lives during the COVID and stuff like that. So we estimate logistics to be a 6,000 billion market in dollars, $6,000 billion of a market. That means there's a lot of flows going from intercontinental to intra-regional to last mile. It's an entire market that is very complicated to optimize and synchronize. That's one. Logistics and the hubs needs to be in the cities. And I'm looking at you, Mayor, because this is so incredible, this whole thing. We are all inhabitants and consumers. As inhabitants, we don't want any noise. We don't want any pollution. By the way, we're right. And we want nature in the cities. We all agree. As consumers, we want everything in 2 hours delivered at our home. To actually solve this incredible equation, you need logistics hubs close to the cities. Most of the mayors, at least that I've met, don't want any logistics hubs close to the consumer markets. So they put them in the countryside. So you have all these big warehouses, usually ugly, I have to say, taking a lot of space, attracting with difficulty labor, right? Because it's out of nowhere. Who wants to go nowhere?
And as the mayor says, people want to live in the city.
That's exactly the point. So we need to have a partnership with the mayors in general to make logistics better known in terms of what there is inside that business, and to have the logistics hubs in the cities. However, they need to be architecturally good looking, aesthetic. We don't want these ugly buildings. They have to go inside the landscape. They need to be zero energy. And what comes out has to be green. So as a logistics company, I have to tell you, we're working towards this footprint, this blueprint actually, for logistics hubs to be integrated in the landscape. Once we've done that, we provide work. However, the people need to be able to actually have housing in the city. And one of the issues is in big cities, real estate is too expensive for blue-collar workers. So there is a need to provide housing in the cities that is affordable for blue-collar workers as well as white collars that actually are not yet the CEO. That's really something that we all need to work towards. So better logistics hubs, providing jobs, and having housing for the people that work there. And to come back to the pipeline issue, we have a labor shortage. So we need all the people we can, women, men, coming from all diverse backgrounds. And to the point of Jean-Pierre, I fully agree. I mean, the more diverse your company is, the better, first of all, it attracts talents, young people, but also you are a real counterpart to your clients because themselves, they are also going in that direction. They want to have companies that are suppliers that have the same values. So that is great news, actually, that society is moving the same way. Investors, employers, employees. And we still need, as companies, to train, which we do. We have a program called Investors in People where we actually commit to train people expertise-wise, but more importantly on leadership principles.
Yes.
And leadership principles are very simple. In Geodis, one leader is one person who has the responsibility of another one. So that means everybody is a leader, potentially. And we all know that you can be born a leader, but most of the time you learn to be a leader. There are ways to take care of people that you learn, indeed. So we are spending a lot of time on that, and for women in particular, because we often see that women, maybe, I don't know what it is, but probably from the history, have a lack of assertiveness. So we train a lot of the women executives on how to assert, how to actually believe in their intuition. Intuition is positive if it's not based on bias. And so that's pretty much what we do as a company, and we will continue to do that to make logistics attractive, to work with the mayors, because the equation has to be solved.
I completely agree. And Jean-Pierre, I'm going to play off on what Marie-Christine said. We've all been talking about internal gender diversity. I'm just curious about that elusive thing called inclusiveness also. It's not just diversity, it's inclusiveness also. So how do you think we foster social cohesion and encourage that sustainable urban development? Because that is the inclusive part that we need to discuss.
Well, probably several answers to your question. The first one, with my focus, which is energy and climate transition, is to make this transition affordable.
Yes.
And we know that there will be huge amount of financial resources necessary to upgrade the energy system, to make sure that we can bring in new technology like hydrogen into the picture. But when you are the mayor of a city like Milan or Paris, you have limited resources, you are levying taxes on your citizen, and we need to make sure that the solution we bring to make this transition possible are indeed affordable. And by the way, look at what's going on currently. We are seeing the price of energy skyrocketing. Part of it is probably a long-term trend, part of it is just a significant short-term event. But I already here in France, some politicians taking position, we say, oh, why don't we forget about this energy transition? It's too costly. If we want to avoid this, we need to make sure that transition is made affordable. And this is really something that we have included in our strategy at ENGIE. And when we bring a solution, we are very attentive to make sure that there are paybacks, that there will be savings generated to make this transition affordable. Second element, but you've mentioned it, this transition, in some part of it, will require a significant workforce. So we need to bring employees in, we need to train them, and when we do this, we have the ability to make sure that this is an inclusive process, that we are going into the suburban areas where we have a number of people who are unemployed and make sure that you bring them into employment.
Yes.
And vocational training, apprentissage, as we say in France, is a very good way to bring these people closer to a job. And this is something that we consider as being a priority. And now, last part of my answer. Within the company, you can't talk about diversity if you don't put the word inclusiveness right after it.
Yes.
Otherwise, diversity will exclude people, or some people will feel that they are excluded. So for me, this bringing these two words together, diversity and inclusion, is very, very key. And inclusion is just to make sure that everyone, whatever their gender, their color, their history, their beliefs, everyone feels that they have a role to play, that they contribute to a common goal. And I was mentioning that at ENGIE we put energy transition as a purpose, and this is we want all of our employees, 160,000 today, we want all of our employees to consider that they are striving to make this planet a better place. And this is a way we can think that inclusiveness will make us successful.
And you know that they just changed, of all things I read, they changed the motto of Superman just this week. So instead of truth, justice, and the American way, it's truth, justice, and a better tomorrow, which is the exact way we are trying to focus. Young, what role do you think women play in us moving towards that better living for us all?
In fact, in the transport sector, only 17% of the staff is women, employees. So that means that there is an extreme imbalance in the composition of the staff workforce in the mobility sector. But I also come from the government, and when I was working in the Ministry of Infrastructure and Transportation in Korea, my colleagues and my boss, they were all men. That means that when I make law or rules and design of infrastructure, I'm biased as men because I do not know the specific needs of women and specific travel patterns of women. So in the end, to make a balance in our society, there should be a balance in the decision-making of the body between man and woman. But traditionally, as I mentioned in my previous comment, and usually when we talk about transport, we thought about power and physical work and so on and so on. But Now timing is getting better because we experience new technology, especially in the digital sector. And if we know the software, if we know how to operate the machine, even a woman can really do in a port, at the port and at the airport and so on. So I think very importantly, the society has to change a kind of perception about the job in the transport sector, and also education, the curriculum should change. And in the long term, perhaps we can have more gradually more the balance in our workforce in the transport sector. But personally, I think it's going to take some time because it cannot really happen next year in 2 years. But now is the time to know why we have to do this. So logically, we have to do this because of this, and to convince people. And in the end, in the international cooperation, we share the knowledge and best practices to convince the countries in behind and so on. So we can all work together.
Thank you so very much. I really want to thank everyone for the conversation today. It's clear we can't solve the roots of social and economic problems today, but we've shown that with some planning, some thoughtfulness, some collaboration, we can actually make a functioning urban environment. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask you to conclude in the same vein in which you started us today. I'd love to know your final thoughts on how we can counteract the social and spatial exclusion issues so that there is a feeling of belonging for all of us in the urban environments that we also love.
Yes, it is fundamental, and now it's the time. So, as I was telling you before, this forum are fundamental. This forum is so important, but we must act. I believe that now it may be the time, even for the public system, to tell if you don't accept, you company, you engine, you geodis, if you do not accept to be in those conditions we are discussing, you cannot participate to public tender, for instance. So there are, now it's the time, because otherwise we say we are good, or otherwise I can tell my board is composed by 50% of women, but it is not sufficient. Now it's the time. I believe that even the men must feel their duty, must feel the urgency to change many things in our life. So I will try to demonstrate in Milan that we can do it.
And we all feel that so strongly. I'd like to thank you all for your attention today. I thank Chiara Carrazza and the amazing Women's Forum team for putting together this group of phenomenal experts. Thank you for your candidness, and thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. I think they would like us to stand.
Je sais pas, vous avez été banquière à l'origine.
Maybe Christine?